everybody. Super excited to join you guys today. And today we'll talk a little bit with some graduate students about their writing process. And I always think it's a good thing to kind of get tips and tools from one another to help us all through this writing journey. So I know you had a great day of learning about writing resources. And so hopefully we'll be able to share with you guys some more resources, but also some strategies to getting through this writing process. So today I have with me Vic, Yane, and Ola may be joining us soon. And what I'm going to just ask them to do really quickly is just introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about some of the writing projects that you've had to do. Vic, you want to get started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Vic. I recently defended this past December, so I'm in that formatting step that was mentioned earlier in this workshop, and it is quite nerve-wracking. For my writing projects, I mostly had to write protocols for the lab, manuscripts for publication, and then this last year, I worked on my dissertation, which was the most emotionally taxing thing that I've ever had to write. So definitely down to answer any questions about that part.
Awesome, thank you. Yane, what about you?
Hi there, my name is Yone. I'm a health informatics grad student, and I was in the thesis for last semester, but I switched over to the internship option.
Great, thank you. So, so let's talk a little bit about the writing process. And I think this is kind of different for everybody, but can you two tell us a little bit about your writing process and any challenges you might have faced? Diana, you want to start?
Okay, yeah, well, writing and I aren't best friends. Honestly, it really varies. Like for me, every time I write, I always have to have like soothing, like classical music, or I find the sound of rain very soothing. So I'll have that play in the background. And I will also come up with like a topic name for each section. Like for the introduction, here's a name. Middle, here's a name. Conclusion, here's a name. And I always usually don't start at the beginning. It's usually the middle or the end for me.
Yeah, I'm definitely one that doesn't like starting in the beginning. So I always started my my research work with methods and results. You already know what those are. So
oh Lord.
that always helped me get started. Nick, what about you?
I adopt a similar practice where I start with my methods and results, and the introduction usually is done to help the reader or the audience know what the general broad topic is. So I do think introduction is best reserved for last, and then the discussion is usually done after I write up my results, because I'm trying to tie what I find, at least in my liver disease articles, and how it ties into the general practice or research for liver disease studies. I also use white noise, and I prefer space noise, which is like a weird vacuum void, or crackling fire. So I do like rain, but those two were very important during my thesis writing.
Space noise, I'm gonna have to check that out. My favorite is kind of the smooth jazz, but then I also sometimes will find myself singing along. So if you're like me, maybe that's not the route to go. All right. So what about any advice or tips for folks that are on the call today? Vic, do you want to start?
Could you repeat the end of that question? I'm sorry.
Any advice or tips? For me, I think getting started was always my hardest thing. So any advice or tips for folks who are kind of maybe getting started or at least working towards their end goal and might be feeling a little stuck?
Yeah, I definitely have some advice for that. Whenever you're getting started with something as big or as monumental as like your thesis or dissertation, I do think it's best to just start with one experiment, one result. And it doesn't have to be in continuation with each other. It doesn't have to be chronological. Just right, experiment. I looked at these things, results, I found these results. And that helps you at least get words on paper, because the most daunting thing is that white page or black page, if you do the dark mode, just staring back at you with the blinking cursor. It almost feels like a 90s like hacker movie or something, because it's so stressful. But to get started, it sounds really naive, but it really just is start writing. Even if it's not something that's going to end up in your final manuscript or dissertation, having words on paper inspires more words. So that's how I suggest to get started.
That's great. Thank you. Go ahead, Yanni.
For my advice, there's really nothing wrong with asking for help. Like when I was working on my thesis, but I dropped that, I went to Sarah Amin for assistance. And before I started grad school, I thought, when I'm a grad student, I shouldn't be asking for help. I'm at another level, blah, blah, blah. But really, get off your high horse. You're still a human being. If you need help, ask for it. And she helped me tremendously.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. We're all in process, right? So, and no one just knows everything. And yes, ask for help. There are lots of resources out there. There are lots of people who have gone through this process that can be helpful as well. Absolutely. So I see that Ola has joined us. Ola, do you want to introduce yourself real quick and tell us about some of the writing projects that you have done?
Yeah, hi. My name is Ola. I'm a second year biology PhD student. I'm currently in Dr. Melissa Casina's lab in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. So I've actually been writing science papers since my undergrad. I've actually had several publications with my same lab. And then for grad school, I just recently had my first author paper published. And then I also had my preliminary exams, and that was a whole process too. And I also wrote a review article. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Vic is there, Dr. Vic. So she just finished her dissertation. Super proud of that. So exciting.
It hasn't really hit me yet. So I'm like, oh, I'm just still a student.
It'll take a while, trust me. It'll take a little while. But yes, that's exciting. And definitely celebrate all of your accomplishments. I'm writing a little note in the chat to tell folks to feel free to drop any questions that you may have in the chat. But I'm curious about how you got yourself organized to do some of the writing. And I know that there are people who use different methods for time management and different organization methods. Do any of you have any tips or particular programs that you've used or methods that you've used to organize and manage your time or manage your writing? Yana, you unmuted.
I can speak on that a little bit. So I never used any outside tools. I tried using websites, organization websites like Trello, but it was so time intensive to just generate this organization boxes that I would check off, etc., that I decided to just create an outline of what I expected in a Word document. And I would just I printed that out and I would cross off each section as I worked on it or finished it. And that made it a lot easier. I'm sorry if I'm breaking up. I might have bad Wi-Fi.
No, you're good. We heard that loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I didn't use anything special. I mean, I did the same method that Vic used, except it was on an Excel sheet. I tried to create a schedule, but honestly, I'm not that good at following through, so.
Ola, what about you?
Yeah, so I usually start out with like a really, really roughed outline of like, okay, just what am I writing? And then like for things that have like sections, like review articles, like there's like an abstract and like just like different parts and sections. I usually set like a date or a deadline for myself for when I want those sections done.
Yeah, thanks. Although that's really kind of similar to my style too. I'm very kind of deadline driven. So if I have a deadline, I try to work backwards from it. I'm also a time scheduler. So when I was writing, like really writing, I would schedule out every minute of my writing time, like down to my breaks and my bathroom time, all of that. So, that's kind of what kept me on schedule because, it's very easy to drift off into something else. Any questions from the folks who are here today?
I have one for the other panelists. One of the things when I started writing that no one really prepared me for was just how hard, like emotionally it is to write like these big things, right? Like you're supposed to finish it and then you have, let's say, your boss or PI or instructor reading it. And when it's a class, you get a grade and you're like, okay, great, I did good or I did bad. And there's like this instant response. But whenever you're building up on, let's say, a project that you're trying to publish, how did you guys handle that pressure that either you put on yourself or was put on you externally by someone else?
Go ahead, Yanni.
For me, it was both. I mean, that's why I dropped the class. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. And I really beat myself up for a while. But yeah.
Well, I want to encourage you that if you do come to that point, don't beat yourself up. Understand that you have your own limitations and do what's best for you for your mental health and for whatever capacity you can handle. Okay. Also, counseling and psychological services are always a resource to you. If you ever need to reach out and talk to them, our students get 6 free sessions. So definitely take advantage of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Ola, do you want to share?
Yeah, so initially it's like always really overwhelming, but then, I just remind myself to be kind to myself because, the whole process, it's a learning process and no one's expecting you to be perfect. My PI is like, okay, I'm expecting this to be absolute crap at the start. So like, just do what you can, And like when you get comments from like other people who read your papers too, like they'll give you ideas. And like I think it's just realizing that like the people around you are there to uplift you and like help you progress and succeed. That helped me a lot. So, just having that like support system around me and just, having that positive thinking and being kind to myself really helped me a lot.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I'll just share too that even in the work that I do now, I still do a lot of writing and we go back and forth with edits. My boss edits me all the time. So that's a real thing. And it certainly is a process. Even when I think I put out a decent draft, it'll come back, and the thing is they're only trying to make it better, right? So I think keeping that in mind too is that it's not something that is harsh or someone's trying to make you feel some type of way or belittle your skills. They're only trying to hone your skill set and make you better. So I have a question from an audience member. How do you know when to stop writing? It can always be better. You can always write a little bit more. How do you know when to stop?
I guess to me, it depends on what is it? If it's like a manuscript, and it's time sensitive because we're trying to publish it before someone else scoops it, then the time to stop writing is when the last experiment result has been received and you've put it in there and it's been discussed. Like, that is the time to stop, because you can always improve the manuscript, but that also gives opportunities for someone else to publish this really amazing data that you've collected yourself. And then when it's the dissertation, the time to stop is when you're done. I had a laundry list of experiments I wanted to do. I wanted my dissertation to be the longest thing ever for some reason. I was just trying to torture myself. I don't know. And I eventually found a spot where I was like, this is fine. I don't need to do anymore. This is my doctoral work. I don't have to, why am I trying to like pull last minute more stuff to put in here? It's not impressing anybody. Like, one person's going to read it and that's probably my PI, you know, like although this document is very important to us because we did all the work, it's not going to make or break you as a scientist or as a PhD if you're getting your PhD in another field. So I guess it seems like very ethereal to say that it's like you'll just know when to stop, because if you just want it to be perfect, you're never going to stop. So like one advice I heard that I think is quite common is like, the perfect dissertation is a finished dissertation. So it's just like, when you're done, just be done. Don't continue adding more stuff to it. And I think that that is applicable to many other writing opportunities, including blogs. Like, I love to read people's blogs, and whenever they're like way too long, I do get tired of like reading it, you know? So it's sort of like, try to find that organic stopping point that like you feel like, okay, my main point got across and I'm good. I don't need to add anymore.
Great thoughts. Any other thoughts? Good deal. Any other questions from folks? You can drop them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Are there any proofreading resources?
Yeah, I believe the Writing Center does help with that aspect. And then at least for the IBMG at IU School of Medicine, which is the program that I'm a part of, we have faculty or staff and faculty that are willing to read your at least dissertation over and help you with formatting, which is really critical when you're trying to get a fast review.
And Vic is right. University Writing Center will look through your stuff, and they will, they're not necessarily checking for content, but they will check for any proofreading errors. They will check for the flow of things, make sure things like have a decent flow when you're telling a story. So all of that's really helpful. And you have a committee that is there, and you can use your committee and use your committee members to do some proofreading and to do some things ahead of time. I know we always kind of feel like we have to give our committee the perfect document. It has to be flawless when we pass it or send it to those folks, but it does not have to be. And many times it will not be. So definitely utilize your committee as well. Other questions or thoughts?
I guess I just want to hear myself talk more. I don't know. But like, I guess one of the things that was really important to me when I was writing the dissertation is like, when I was feeling defeated, to understand that it wasn't real. It was like, I'm just feeling this way because this task is so daunting, right? And I think that this does come up in a lot of things, even just a writing assignment for a class. Like, it can feel overwhelming, but it's important to be like forgiving to ourselves and like take that break that you need for that like mental refresh to tackle the problem again later. So I guess that's like my biggest advice or thought on writing is like, make sure to take the break that you really need. It might be 5 minutes. It might be a whole day where I just don't do or talk science to anybody. I'm like, just get it out of my mind because I can't look at another like cell line ever again. You know, those kinds of things I think are important. And as students, we overwork ourselves, and it's very common in academia to push ourselves to work more hours than maybe we should. So be very like, be forgiving and like give yourself the love you need in whatever manner is best.
Agree. Give yourself some grace for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Vic. How long did it take you to complete your dissertation?
I wrote mine kind of fast. I did it in like 4 months, but I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. It was the worst time of my life. Like I cried a lot, and I know it might seem childish, but I was very upset during those 4 months. So I would give yourself more time than that to write the thesis or dissertation, because keep in mind, not only are you writing the content, you're getting comments from your committee, from your PI, and suggestions of more experiments to do. So you're also like jumping in and out of lab if you're in like a lab setting. So I would definitely give yourself more time, but I did mine in 4, and I haven't gotten the comments back from Deborah Barker. So we'll see how well I did.
Thank you. I had to give you so much applause because I also tried to complete mine within a semester, but it takes huge commitment. You're basically living, breathing that paper 24/7.
That's very true. If my partner did not feed me, I'm not sure what I would have eaten. Like maybe refried beans straight from the can. Like honestly, it was very taxing. That it was really, really hard.
So along those lines, are there things or pieces like reflecting back that you maybe could have done early on that may have, helped you out a little bit?
I wish I had written as I went, because you always hear people tell you write as you go. And I'm like, LOL, yeah, totally. And then I waited until right before graduation to write. So writing as you go really is the best advice. It's not really easily applied because we're also working in the lab all day, and sometimes you go home and you're tired and you don't want to write. Like, I don't want to look at my laptop. I want to watch Love is Blind season 2. Like I think that is the best advice, but just do it as often as you can instead of like every day I need to write. Like give yourself maybe some writing time. Like I've heard that people do deep work where you'll do like 2 hours of nothing but X thing. So this could be writing. Maybe like every Friday afternoon, as you reflect on your week of experiments, you can write. And I think that would be something I wish I had applied in my academic career, because then it would have been way less stressful in the end.
Yes, and if you would like to do this, our Right on Site and Right Place, Right Time resources are available to you. They meet for 2 hours on, I think there's Wednesdays and Thursdays settings. So if you want to meet in person, they meet in Kavanaugh. If you want to meet online, they meet via Zoom. So that you can really space out that 2 hours a week to do some deep writing if you need to. And you can pop in and join at any time. Other questions? Anything else?
All right, I'm getting some texted to me.
Okay.
But yeah, so one of them was how many proofs or drafts before your final? And I had about seven drafts before, because I would like write a chapter, write the next chapter, send. Like I kind of, as I was writing, I would send it off for comments, because sometimes I miss stuff. Like I had 2 figure 12s. I didn't catch that. I was busy. I was busy writing. So things like that are really useful, because then you can edit it early on, and then you don't have to mess with the formatting of your manuscript. So if someone else wants to comment on how many proofs or drafts you have before your final, you guys can answer that too.
One thing I'll say is that save your drafts, like draft and whatever the date is, because sometimes people will say, yeah, that looked great. And then they'll come back and say, you know what, I liked it the way you did it the last time better. Or, those revisions didn't really work for me. It wasn't very clear. So why don't we restate it the way that we did in the last draft? So keep your drafts save all of them, and you can save them by different dates if you want to, or save them by different numbers. But I would just say, if you have the capacity to save them, just save all the drafts. You might go back and be like, oh, I like the wording of this one better.
Also, like sometimes committee members will read, but like they'll skip an entire section. So one of my committee members was like, oh, great, you talked about this cell. What about the other cells in the introduction? And it was literally right before the section he just jumped to. So some of these comments may not be helpful. So even if you see a bunch of like comments or highlights, don't take it too personal. Like you guys were mentioning, it's all to make the manuscript better, but sometimes like we're all human. So it's very easy for them to just be like, oh, let me see what I'm interested in. Okay, I'm going to read this part.
Any other comments about drafts? All right, good deal. Did you get any other text messages, Vic, with questions?
Yeah, the next question was like, oh, how many or when do you give it to your committee? Especially when it comes to your thesis or dissertation. Mine was like, I was giving it to them constantly because the point was that I'm writing right now. Keep that in mind, expect it coming, like expect that more writing is going to ensue. So that was helpful, but mostly it was my PI. My PI was good about like asking me randomly for an update because I'm very, very bad about like self-moderating my work. I get distracted. I'd rather be in the lab, frankly. I don't want to be writing. Like writing is the worst thing on the planet in my mind, but that is how you get money in academia. So it is important to do. So yeah, I'm bad at willpower, which seems ironic because like we're all good with willpower because we're in grad school, right? This isn't easy. We're all pushing ourselves, but somehow I couldn't push myself to just meet these deadlines I would set.
Yeah, and I like that advice too. And, because I do think that sometimes we think that it has to be a perfect document in order for me to send it to my committee. It does not have to be perfect. You can send it to them at any point. They are there to help you. That's why they're on your committee. Don't think that you're being a burden to them. They will read it or skip through it, or at least say that they have seen it. So I think that's very positive and really helpful. Other questions? All right, good deal. Well, I think we're about at our time, and I want to just thank our panelists really quickly, giving them a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you all for the questions that you have. Feel free to connect with our panelists if needed, and ask any more questions if you'd like to.